Please be seated. Shabbat Shalom. You know, one of the incredible things about modern technology is that these days you can sit in your living room and you can basically tune into any TV channel from anywhere in the world. So I get the Israeli channel, Arutza Israeli, which originates in Miami, but it's actually a mix and match of programming from all over the spectrum of Israeli TV networks. And we've developed a little ritual in my house every year for Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaTzmaut. We sit all together and we watch TV when it's about to change from Yom HaZikaron to Yom HaTzmaut in those couple of hours that are really, really sad hours in Israel. And one of the things that Israeli TV does every year is that they show people telling the stories of their children and their spouses and their parents who were lost in battle fighting for the state of Israel. And they show footage and they show pictures of the people who passed and fell in battle. And it's very sad, but it's also tremendously, tremendously energizing. Because you know you're about to enter that small period of time where extreme sadness is going to change suddenly into extreme joy. In a matter of seconds, all of the tears, all of the crying out is changed for this exuberant feeling of knowing that we have a place that we call home. And that in spite of the high sacrifice and the high price that we've had to pay, it belongs to no one else but us. And so 23,000 people have fallen since the establishment of the State of Israel. That would be the equivalent of almost 1 million Americans in 65 years. So when I say that it's a tremendous price to pay, I mean it. Because by the way, these people fall at the prime of their lives, at the time at which they're most productive to society, when they can contribute the most, and when they can do the most for others. So you watch people telling the stories and crying and smiling and remembering, and you do it with them. And this is my ritual now every year. And then when Yom HaTzmaut starts, it really makes you proud. And so I decided that this year, I was going to try to change the narrative. And instead of speaking about the conflict and Iran and how we solve it and what we're going to do, I'm going to speak about what Israel actually does and does well. Abba Eban once said that in this life, it is better to be disliked than to be pitied. And that's an important phrase to remember. You see, we're never going to please everyone, whether it is as individuals or as a country or as families. There is always someone who will not like us. There is always someone who will disagree with us. And that's the story of life. And that's the story with Israel. But I'd rather be disliked than pitied. And so, I want to ask you to remember for 1 second right now with me a famous American movie that has nothing to do with Israel, but has a lot to do with me, which is called A Day Without a Mexican. Do you remember that movie? Imagine if in the United States, one day all Mexicans didn't show up to work, you wouldn't have restaurants, your grass will grow like a jungle, you wouldn't have a rabbi, right? You were waiting for that one, right? There's many things that would happen. And if you had the same movie and actually call it A Day Without Israel, let me tell you what would happen. Among other things, no USB drives, you know, the little key drives were invented in Israel. You would have no cherry tomatoes. How's that? No irrigation by drip. And here in Nevada, we would really feel that. No voice over internet, no VoIP, right? So services like Vonash will go silent. I would have no phone service. and so forth and so on. And by the way, very important, no instant messaging, which was actually also invented in Israel. And the list goes on. I think it is important for us to change the narrative. I think it is important for us to talk about the things that are great and good and what is happening, what will happen. And the fact that in spite of the conflict, Israel thrives every single day. You know which is the country in the world with the most traded stocks in NASDAQ after the United States? Israel. 7 million people in this tiny piece of land. If the US stocks were delisted from NASDAQ tomorrow, Israel would sustain it. Think about that for a second. So every time we read a nasty article, every time we read that somebody hates Israel, or people want to throw us into the sea, remember this. Golda Meir once was asked, what is Israel's secret weapon? You know what she said? No alternative. Israel's secret weapon is no alternative. We have no alternative. We have to win, and we have to invent, and we have to develop, and we have to be, and we have to become. Because if that stops, we stop. And the Jewish people has never stopped. And so Israel will not stop. Now this year, I discovered something amazing. I actually forwarded this to a couple of you. There's an American comedian who actually made Aliyah 5 years ago by the name of Benji Lovitt. And if you haven't heard his name, you should, because it went viral last week on the internet. Every year he publishes a list of the things that he likes the most about Israel. So this year he published the 64 things that he likes the most about Israel. Last year it was the 63 things, a year before the 62 things. And by the way, he doesn't just add one thing. He does the list all over again every year. And I have to tell you, when I first saw it, I said, I'm not going to read all of this. But one after the next, it kept getting better and better and better. And so I was reminded why I love Israel, why I yearn every year to be there, why I can't live without you, and so you can't live without it either, why Israel is so important. And not because of the advancements in technology or how good we are at windsurfing or judo in the Olympics, but because of the people that live in Israel and who they are. Not when they get themselves dressed in green, but who they are as people every day of their lives. And so I'm going to share with you a couple of those things that Benji Lovitt says in his list that I thought were fabulous. Have you ever noticed that when you go to Israel, you're at the Ben Gurion airport waiting for your luggage, and you start talking to the person next to you? Within 15 minutes, he or she offers to give you a ride home, which you accept, by the way, never fearing anything. And then, on the way home, you discover that you have at least 80 Facebook friends in common. Only in Israel. That's one of the things that I love about Israel. Another one of those things that we love about Israel is that only in Israel, a store is dependable if it's open 24/6. If you've ever dialed the wrong number in Israel, especially during a holiday, let's say you dialed the wrong number in Pesach, after they yell at you for having the wrong number, they still say Chag Sameach, and then they hang up. Right? It is the only country in the world where on Friday afternoons you can find gas stations that if you spend a minimum of 180 shekels, they give you a free newspaper and 2 challahs. You know, Apple just opened its first support center outside of the United States, and it opened it in Israel. So maybe we have a chance that the next Siri will be named Shiri, and she'll have a Hebrew accent. But that's what I love about Israel, that great companies, successful companies, look to Israel as a place to invest and to develop. Like Microsoft, you know, Windows NT was entirely developed in Israel. The Celeron chip from Intel, entirely developed in Israel. And now, we'll see where the Apple story takes us. If you've ever gotten in a cab in Jerusalem, and you've had an Arab cab driver, and when that Arab cab driver says Baruch Hashem a couple of times, that's why we love Israel. Because even cab drivers who are not Jewish say Baruch Hashem. Another thing that Lovitt quotes in his list is that when somebody drops a dish in a restaurant, the entire restaurant screams Mazel Tov at the same time. It's the only country in the world, that's why we love it, where Wonder Woman is called Eshet Chayil. And she's still a superhero. And you go on with this list, and it's a wonderful list. But the thing that I like the most in his list this year was the fact that he said, we love Israel because Gilad Shalit came home. After all of those years in captivity, he came home. And in spite of the criticism and the what would you do's of the world, would you return him? Would you not? Do you let the terrorists go free or not? The only thing that mattered to us as Jews in a Jewish state is that this young man was reunited with his family. And that's why Israel is what Israel is. And that's why we are who we are. So let us change the narrative and remember this. And please, if you haven't seen this list, just go home and Google 64 things I like about Israel. You will not be disappointed. Levitt is a tremendous comedian, and I'm so proud that he made Aliyah. Because, he comes back and forth from the United States to Israel. Maybe one of these days, we'll have him here at Temple Beth Sholom. I really enjoyed reading that list, and you should read it as soon as you can. Shabbat Shalom, Mevorach.